We'll start. Hello, everyone. Good morning. A very, very good morning, actually. Today marks as the first day of our journey to a 3 or 4 weeks long community intervention challenge that we're trying to bring about. So I'm very excited. Thank you for signing up, and I'm so glad that all of you are a part of this. I will start with telling you guys a little bit about Safe City and Red Dot Foundation first, and then we can start with a little small icebreaker. If you guys are in for it, it works. Yeah, so Red Dot Foundation is an organization, Section 8 organization, which works extensively on sexual offenses and violence. So we have developed this app, also a web platform, which has been out since 2017. What it does is that it reports anonymous complaints about any kind of sexual offense, harassment, violence that happens to you, and you can pinpoint the location where it happened. So you can pinpoint it on Google. Basically, it's Yelp, but for safety and security. So that's the idea of it. We have been generating data for so many years now, and that database, all of our database is public. So anybody and everybody has access to it. Now we want to venture into involving students, especially students from certain disciplines, say law students and criminology students, to come here and inculcate the art of studying data in order to come up with your own theories, your own resolutions to the problems that are there. So that's the main focus of what Red Dot Foundation does. Apart from that, we also take a lot of workshops on safety, security. We do a lot of POSH sessions. We also have in parallel another challenge which is going on, which is about design and how design, say, in safe cities and urban planning, how design can impact the security of people and safety of people. So that's a beautiful project that is going on. We have another project which is on data challenge, which is learning how to visualize data, because too much numbers, sometimes numbers can be a little too much for us to digest. So that's another thing that is going on. So we're trying to bring people in to just study the data that we have at the moment, because it's a lot of data, and the number of possibilities of studying it and the number of things that we could come up with, it's great. So that's the idea of how Red Dot Foundation functions, and we're so happy to have you here and just be a part of this journey with us. So thank you so much. Applause for everyone from my side. We'll start with a small icebreaker session. We usually ask people, how is your day, or how are you feeling? But today I really want to ask you guys one thing, which is if you had a superpower, what would it be? And that one question would answer so many aspects of your life, for me right now and for yourself also. So we can take like 2 minutes just to type in the chat box and let me know what kind of superpower would you want to have today. I can start. Telepathy, nice. Reading minds. Elsa can spot potential in people and opportunities. Wow. Reading minds, telepathy, nice. Attract people. Teleporting, definitely, with the new regulations coming in. Travel bans. Immortality. Time travel, definitely. Invisibility. Oh, nice. Granting wishes to only honest people. Good. Going invisible. Resting my mind. Wow. That's needed. Disguise. Wow. Erasing people's memory. Wow. So you guys can keep typing. I will read it. Everybody has access to the chat box. We can all read these. Understanding people and their problems with their perceptions. That's very, very important. Very, very relatable. That's nice. If you guys can still continue writing your superpowers, we'll take it a step ahead, and we will speak about the challenge that we're here participating in. High intelligence. Wow. Nice. Loving this. Yes, so we'll speak about the challenge a little bit. I'll tell you in brief. I've spoken to everybody individually on phone, I know. So I will try to tie knots here that we're going to have a great experience together. So I'll tell you about the community intervention challenge and how it came about. Um, like I told you, the idea is to involve more youths into the art of studying data and getting to use data for their research and studies. Now, we wanted to focus extensively on law students and criminology students because we know that me being actually a lawyer myself, we didn't do round of introductions.
It's okay. Finish what you're saying and then introduce yourself.
We can do. So myself coming from a law school, I know that most of our years of studies goes into just studying secondary data that's already available to us, created by somebody, in books, in articles, and that's how we've studied in law for the longest time. We haven't inculcated the art of actually going out and collecting data, or taking this data and studying the samples that we have. So that was the idea of community intervention challenge. Specifically, theoretically speaking, there is this beautiful theory called the routine activity theory in criminology, which speaks that any kind of crime, any type of crime you take, it happens in your daily routine life, in your everyday life. Let's take example of sexual offenses and see, where do these sexual offenses occur? Do they occur in a place where it's out of your routine? No, these happen in your homes, these happen in your streets, these happen when you're traveling in buses, these happen when you're in school, in college. This is how these things happen, right? So if crime is a routine part of our everyday life, then we need to be a little more observant in seeing how to break these patterns that are there in our routine, in everybody's routine for that matter. So that's the idea of it. We specifically through the app focus on the location, the street, the space where it happens, more than the victim or the alleged criminal. So we specifically don't want to burden more on the victimology or the criminal aspect of crime, but just to see how these locations and altering these locations could impact the crime, if you understand what I'm saying. So every space has a positive and negative factor, right? Like you guys registered in the registration form, you had a small example of one of the studies that we did, how dim lights could affect someone, how a dark painting on a wall could affect someone, how having a bench around an empty space could affect someone, how having an alcohol shop near a school could affect someone. These are the factors that we take into account in order to see the things that we could do today to make these environments safe. And that's how the community intervention challenge came into place. It is an intervention in your own community. I will intervene in my own community, you will intervene in your own community, just to sit back and observe things that contribute to these factors. How is this place becoming a breeding ground to sexual offenses? And if sexual offenses, what kind of sexual offenses there are so many aspects to study, and that's why I'm so excited, because we will be dealing with so many students from so many different cities, and collecting data from there. It's going to be a brilliant journey, just together trying to understand, trying to just observe our own surroundings and see how these things impact us. So that's the idea of community intervention challenge. I will take a moment and have a round of introduction for everyone. Hi, my name is Vaibhavi. I am a lawyer, and I've been working with Red Dot Foundation India as a project and outreach officer. Yeah, thank you. Over to you, Elsa.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elsa Marie Da Silva, and I'm the founder of Red Dot Foundation. I will be doing a detailed presentation after this. So over to our colleague from Agami, Kirtana.
Thank you, Elsa. Hi, everyone. I'm Kirtana. I am also a lawyer, but I've been working with Agami for the last 3.5 years now. When I'm also briefing about the vision of the challenge, I'll go a little into Agami as well. But broadly, we support ideas and entrepreneurs in law and justice, look at ways to enable more solutions for the sector. And yeah, I'm excited to be a part of this and be here. I will give it to Tanya.
Tanya, you're on mute if you're there. Okay, let's move on. Vaibhavi, who else do you want to introduce themselves?
I see Sheila's there, Sonali's there. We can all have a small round of introduction. Soumya's there. Hi, Tanya. Tanya's back.
Sorry, hi. Yeah, sorry, I was unmuted and my network is a little shady. So hi, everyone. Good morning and welcome, to this community intervention challenge. It's going to be super exciting. Have fun. You'll meet interesting people, and I can assure you of that. Thank you so much for signing up. I'm Tanya, and I look after operations and partnerships at Red Dot Foundation, and we will be in touch. We are all on the same group, so and on Discord, so we will definitely be in touch and meet each other often. Thanks.
We also have Sheila Sonali from Sonali is not here. Sheila.
Hi everyone. I'm Sonali, and I also work at Red Dot Foundation as a program officer. So looking forward to seeing how what you guys come up with during this challenge. It's really interesting to see, and it's exciting to see so many of you here. Look forward to this.
Hi, I'm Sheila. I'm also with Red Dot, to work in different areas with Red Dot. I'm going to work with Vaibhavi and Sonali on this project. And I'm the one who keeps calling and pushing people that they have to attend. So you're going to see more and hear more of me rather through this program. And it's going to be good. So keep in touch and stay there right through the program.
Thank you so much, Sheila, Tanya, Sonali, Kirtana, Elsa. We will move on in the presentation. I will, before we go to Elsa's presentation, could we have Agami, Kirtana from Agami to speak about the vision of the challenge?
Thank you, Vaibhavi. As Vaibhavi explained at the beginning, right? The idea is to look at what are the other contextual reasons that are causing harm or lack of safety for women and other people in different areas. And a large part of what Agami also looks for is when there is a law and justice issue, when there is a problem, how can we come at it from a solutions perspective? A lot of the times especially in the legal space, we come at, when we look at a problem, we think, what can research look like? What can policy look like? We think of courts, we think of going to the police, judiciary, etc. But we don't actually think about what's happening on the ground, right? What is the context in which that particular harm is happening, for instance? What is the context? What is the cultural context in that area at that point in time? Why are people not going to police? Are there any gaps? And how do we think about that from a solutions perspective? And these are solutions that can be, and right now at this stage, you're expected to do a prototype of a solution. What does a prototype look like? How do you identify a prototype? We'll have a separate workshop as well for that. The larger vision though is, how can more of us participate in a system, right? How can more of us see a problem, see a gap, and then think, oh, I can solve for this, not just for myself, but also people in my community, and then like people in my city, and then it goes broader and broader from there. So that, like, for example, right now, citizens, we don't think that we can participate in law and justice system. We think that only police can help us, or only courts can help us, or only lawyers can help us. So how do we break that mindset? How do we go from justice and law being something that is offered to us or given to us, but something that we can actively participate in? We can actively go up to someone in our municipality or in any of the government departments, etc., and demand for what we need, or create solutions. It could look like a legal awareness solution. It could look like setting up hubs of different people. So depending on your area, the data that is emerging, your conversations with people there, we can come up with different solutions as well. But the idea is, how do we do that? And once we have more and more solutions, India is a huge country with like 1.3, 1.6 billion people. One solution is not going to be an answer. We need more and more people to be justice makers. So that is Agami's interest. Agami's interest is, how do we break the barrier of citizens from being able to access justice systems? And through this challenge, young people are the ones with no baggage. You're all the ones with ideas. You're all the ones that can shape what the future can look like. So for us, a lot of our thinking is about how can we enable more young people. So many of you are interested. We only want to be that platform that pushes and enables and nourishes all of you along this journey, right? So that's the vision for the challenge. You're going to identify problems. You're going to come up with solutions. You're going to learn how to speak to different stakeholders and different people. We're here to enable, guide you, and support you through that where you need it. And over time, we hope to see more solutions like this emerge in all parts of the country.
Thank you so much, Kirtana. That was beautiful. That was just what we wanted. I will take this presentation to now Elsa and have her speak some words on how what are the ways in which this challenge could change you.
Thanks, Vaibhavi. Thanks, Kirtana. And, I'm just going to do a very quick presentation. It's going to be a lot of information, but I think it will help you. I started Safe City in December 2012 after the gang rape of Jyoti Singh on a bus in Delhi. And the idea at that time, because I was in the aviation sector, I was in corporate, in strategy, we were using a lot of data. I myself am a survivor, and when I went to Google to make sense of the Nirbhaya incident, I couldn't find any statistics, and that led me to believe there is a data gap that exists, and that needed to be bridged by a CrowdMap, which is an anonymous reporting platform. Now, you can't talk about violence without first understanding its origin or the context in which it happens. So a few guidelines, I know you have competing priorities. So you have another hour and a half approximately with us. Keep an open mind, but switch off your mobile phones. Listen with empathy, do not judge. We will be sharing a lot of examples. So what is said in this room stays in this room. And if you want to quote those examples later, you can do so, but without revealing identity of people. Let us know if you are triggered. You know the team from Red Dot Foundation, send us a private message or maybe step away, drink a glass of water and then come back. But do let us know if any of it is triggering. And of course, throughout, we might be taking screenshots for social media. So let us know if that's okay. So I'll give you 3 recent examples why gender sensitivity is actually necessary. And it's, in my opinion, a leadership trait that is relevant for the 21st century. So in April of this year, we had this incident which became a diplomatic nightmare, actually, where Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission president, and her counterpart in the European Council went to visit the Turkish president Erdogan. And during the photo shoot, there was only 2 chairs instead of 3. And the 2 men promptly went and sat down without even blinking an eyelid. And we can post the video later in the Discord for you to look at the whole incident, how Ursula said something, but none of these men actually responded. And later she shared how she felt during that incident. And this is not a one-off thing, because it happens pretty much all the time, where either women or vulnerable groups are sidelined, spoken over, or their views are dismissed. This is another incident during the vice presidential debate during the 2019 US elections, where Mike Pence kept interrupting Kamala Harris all the time. And she said, I'm speaking, let me finish, I'm speaking. And again, this is not a one-off situation. There's a new word called man-interrupting now, man-interrupting. It happens in boardrooms. It also happened in President Obama's cabinet. In his first term, he had many women ministers, but every time they spoke up, their male colleagues would intentionally or unintentionally speak over them or shut them down, till the women decided to echo each other. And then President Obama caught on. And then after that, he made sure that everybody speaks. And then, if you remember, in 2019, we had 3 people who won the Nobel Prize in Economics: Abhijit Banerjee, Esther Duflo, his wife, and Michael Kramer. But the Indian press only wrote about Abhijit Banerjee and referred to Esther Duflo as wife. Abhijit Banerjee and wife win the Nobel Prize. She's more than a wife. She is the youngest person to win the prize, along with being the first French woman and only the second woman ever to win the prize in economics. And moreover, she's only the 53rd woman to win the Nobel Prize, when there have been 850 men who won the Nobel before. So this is really why we are talking about it, because we live in a culture that has an unconscious bias, and we need to challenge it. First, we need to understand what is a bias. So there are 150 biases. You may have heard of different kinds: affinity bias, where you're drawn to people based on the affinity to them. There's a confirmation bias, where you and attribution bias. So confirmation is where somebody confirms to your idea of how they're supposed to behave, and attribution, where you automatically assign certain traits to them based on previous experiences. Then there's conformity bias, where there's a herd mentality and you all conform. There's the halo and the horn effect, where either you make them an angel or a devil. But we'd like to talk about the gender bias, And why is there a gender bias or all these biases? Because our brain is struggling to process the bombardment of information that we experience from the time we wake up till the time we sleep. And our brain is actually used to filing things in a 2-system methodology that operates simultaneously. So it's this or that. So we try to put it in compartments and make sense of it. And therefore, that also happens to people. and we put them into categories. And if they don't fit those categories, our brains get confused. So we force them into those categories or buckets or silos or whatever. And these biases get wired into our human brain. And over a period of time, it becomes systematic thinking, which could be flawed. And therefore, we assume that these are learned through culture and experiences and are contextual. And so if they are learned, they can be unlearned. Now, what is sex and gender? So are they the same? Are they not? And if you look at this, you know, the woman over here is in blue and the man is in pink. But our brains don't register that because we've been conditioned now over a period of time to associate pink with a woman and blue with a female. And if I were to throw adjectives to you and ask you to categorize who would more likely show those behaviors, you would again start to, without thinking, categorize them again to one or two of these people. So what are normally the behaviors associated with male? They are aggressive, they are strong, they are risk-taking, they are adventurous, they are protective of others, etc. Whereas females are more patient, they are tender, or they cry a lot, they are sensitive, they are shy, etc. So, and if somebody doesn't meet this, then we start putting labels on them, right? So think of some of those labels that you may have experienced. So for example, when we say that, you know, a woman should, or rather the dim light that Vaibhavi was talking about, why is lighting such a big issue? And why, if you think about where you come from, and do your family put restrictions on you or your brother or your sister on what time they can come home? And is it linked to the lighting in the neighborhood? Or come home before it's dark, or, you know, don't walk down a dark and lonely street. And why is that the case? You know, is a woman more vulnerable than a man in public spaces, for example? So when you're thinking about your solution in the future, always start thinking also about sex and gender and its social and cultural context in which it happens. And if you didn't know, sex is a biological construct and gender is really the social construct, okay? So, but again, when you say gender, there's so many aspects to it. So one is the biological sex, where you're born either with female organs or male organs or a mix of both. And then you have the gender identity, expression, and attraction. So and all of this is a spectrum. So you could be at one end on one and on the other end at another, or in the middle on some other dimension. So gender identity is how you think about yourself. So whether you identify as a man or a woman, your expression is whether you're feminine or masculine. So maybe I'm born a woman, but I like to express myself in a more masculine way, what society terms as masculine. And then there's attraction, there's sexual attraction and there's romantic attraction. And there are again various dimensions to it. And so this combination of all these things is very complex. It's not binary, but our brains try to put people into these slots and try to make sense of it, but it's not really happening. So again, unconscious bias is instinctively categorizing people and things without being aware of it. And it's a flaw in thinking guided by past experiences and mental preconditioning. They impact us, our work, and our relationships. So how can you deal with it? One is know them well, read about them, recognize that they exist, and be mindful in your words and actions. The second one is think critically and look for evidence, because that's how you can challenge it, right? But don't look at things as a coin, this side or that side, but rather like a diamond which has many facets. And when you challenge, take a contrary view, because if you don't ask why, you'll be blindly accepting it. Now, why do we blindly accept? We come to the power and privilege wheel. If you're all here today, it's because we have some amount of power or privilege assigned because of one or more of these dimensions. So again, all of this is a spectrum, and the closer you are to the center, the more power you may have in the world. Again, you could be privileged in one area, because with power comes privilege. You could have privilege in one dimension, but not in the other. Okay, so you could be rich, but you could be dark skinned. You could be rich, you could be dark skinned, you could be an LGBTQ person, so different aspects of it. You could be a woman, you could be a Muslim woman, and you can be highly educated. So again, depending on the situation, again, you could either be marginalized or you could have a lot of power and privilege. Why are we talking about power and privilege? Because again, with power can come the abuse of it, and you could control others around you. There are many different ways. One is physical abuse, where you can actually see it happening. So you kick, you push, you slap, you hit, you pull, you bite, you rape, etc. But then there's others which are invisible. So like using privilege, using isolation, emotional abuse, coercion and threats. You minimize, deny, blame, sexual abuse, use children, economic abuse, use intimidation. And we can post all of this so you can go through in great detail, but that's why it's very important to constantly question your privilege, understand where you might have power and how you are behaving with those around you. And again, why are we talking about this? Because in the work we do, we know that gender-based violence disproportionately affects more women than men. So 1 in 3 women experience sexual assault at least once in their lifetime. And more than half of these are girls below the age of 16. 80% of these incidents are not reported to the police. Some statistics, about 75% of women and girls face sexual violence in their own neighborhoods. So they don't have to go very far away to get assaulted. 9 out of 10 reported experience sexual aggression or violence, that is obscene comments, to being groped, stalked, or sexually assaulted in a public space in their lifetime. And 65% of women and girls felt fearful or extremely fearful when they go out alone at night. Half of the men this survey interviewed said they had sexually harassed or been violent with a woman in a public space at least once in their lifetime. And 3 out of 4 men agreed with the statement, women provoke men by the way they dress. 2 out of 5 men partially or fully agreed that women moving around at night deserve to be sexually harassed. So what are we seeing? We are seeing that it's actually part of our culture, it's normal. And day before, the National Family Health Survey was released, and this is the headlines. Over 75% women justified men beating their wives. And look at the state numbers. Telangana is 84%, Andhra Pradesh 84%, Karnataka 77%, Manipur 66%, and so on and so forth. These are horrific numbers, where it's part of the culture where it's okay to beat people, and that means it's normalized. We also want to talk about sexual assault for males, which is hard to talk about. And this was an article that was released yesterday, where, these college football is a huge event in the US. And the 2 big universities, Michigan and Ohio State, their games have 100,000 fans, and their ex-players have said that there have been professors or sports teachers who've been abusing them since 1966. One of those guys has even died in 2008, but they have now found courage to speak up. And because one person spoke up at Michigan and one person spoke up at Ohio State, many more players have come forward to talk about the abuses that they have experienced. So understanding the sexual violence spectrum is extremely important. There are many forms of it. We've already done the power wheel, but some other forms are non-verbal, verbal and physical. And you as law students know that there under Indian law, there are sections to take care of all of these types of sexual harassment and violence. And whilst it may seem too trivial, it can be extremely debilitating to many because we limit choices, movements, affect mental health. Think back about being out in public spaces in the dark, and many families don't allow their girls to go out late at night. And you know that a lot of people, life doesn't stop at 6 p.m. On Sunday, I was doing a workshop for Gindi Engineering College, and one of the young men shared that his time to return home was 10 p.m., but for his sister, it's 6 p.m. But after 6 p.m., there's so many things that you can do. And I personally have attended evening classes for college whilst I was working. Networking at the corporate sector always happens late in the evening. You can take up a second job if you wish, or you can just be in a public space with your friends. And that also is part of the quality life that we all would like to have, right? But if you're not allowed to be there, or it's unsafe for you to be there, then it is infringing on your constitutional right to equality and to a dignified life. So again, this is a slippery slope where harassment by the perpetrator starts off by being objectifying to a person, then degrading and then assaulting to that person. It affects their well-being over a period of time as well. Some of the stories that we did through a photo campaign, those from Mumbai would recognize this is a ladies' coach in the train, the Western Railways or the Central Railways. It is a boon to have a ladies' compartment, but does the harassment stop after you get out of the ladies' compartment? I would say no. A lot of our data shows that in and around the railway stations, you have a high number of sexual harassment. So this story is about this young girl where she had a scary encounter in Dombivli in an auto. So last mile connectivity, she gets out of the train, gets into an auto at 10 p.m. And some of you who've traveled in Mumbai know that sometimes the auto drivers have their friends sitting on the seat in front with them. And they went past her destination and she started, telling them, please stop, please stop. They laughed and they continued till she kind of insisted, and then they stopped. She says it was a 5-minute walk from her home, but it was absolutely terrifying. She just wanted to go home after a long day at work, but instead she was feeling so scared and unsafe, and feeling safe is not a luxury. This is another woman, again, you can see it's at a railway station. She was with her 14-year-old sister walking to the station in Vikhroli. She felt unsafe and scared because there were a group of young boys who started, commenting and using lines from Bollywood films to harass them. This was in the afternoon, so it was daylight. And in a crowd of many people, no one said anything. So she turned around and gave them some galis. And that's when everyone intervened. But what did they do? They scolded her. They asked her why she was behaving so badly, and she thought that they would take her side, but obviously they didn't. And she says, how can we even go to the police when no one supports us in public? And this is also what we've seen when we analyze the data of women being publicly harassed in buses in Chennai. Men masturbate in those buses, and when women witness it, they feel extremely bad, thinking it's their fault. In 50% of the cases, they actually moved away or got off. In 50% of the cases, they spoke up. And when they spoke up, only half the times people intervened, half the times people looked away, which means that we need to support survivors and know how to intervene as well. And hopefully next year we are starting on a whole series of bystander intervention programs so that we can train people on how to be better bystanders. Because if we don't, it leads to this cycle of insecure cultures where there's under communication, under enforcement, and under respect. The survivor is socially conditioned to stay silent and passive. The perpetrator gets bolder over a period of time because bystanders do nothing. The survivor stays silent because of fear of bringing dishonor to herself and her family, or fear of dealing with the police and the lengthy justice system. She doesn't go to the police to file a complaint. Therefore, there's no record of it, no statistics. The police don't do anything. If she does go, they file it in the wrong category, telling her she should file an NC when most of the laws are actually cognizable offenses. And because of the lengthy justice system, many of these never even go through the whole process. And you know that very well. So this is a cycle of insecure cultures. How does Safe City play a part? We encourage anonymous reporting, which then gets documented as location-based trends. We can analyze it right up to the street level. And the idea is to improve situational awareness at the individual level by giving you information like Vaibhavi said, Yelp, right? We use so many peer review apps on a daily basis to make decisions, whether it is Zomato or Swiggy to order from a restaurant, TripAdvisor to plan a holiday, Goodreads for a book. So why don't we share our experiences with each other so that we can make sense of this kind of violence and also use it as a protective mechanism to improve our situational awareness. So this is the web app. On the left-hand side are all the hotspots. It's right now zoomed into Delhi. You can try it for your own city. On the right-hand side, you can filter the information or you can read the reports. Just to give you the breakdown of incidents from October, the highest number was touching and groping, followed by chain snatching and robbery, followed by stalking, then sexual invites, ogling, facial expressions, staring, taking pictures without permission, rape, and then online harassment and onwards. But if you look at it, the intervention for touching and groping versus, say, chain snatching and robbery might be different versus ogling and facial expressions, right? So it's very important to understand what is happening where. And if we deep dive into one area, this is one space in Jogeshwari in Mumbai, where we did an intervention with young girls. If you take from the type of harassment, so 11 o'clock clockwise, the type of harassment, the most number was passing comments, followed by ogling, whistling, stalking, touching, and then winking. Where did it happen? On the left-hand side, in nearby lanes. So close to home or school, or very few were far from home. So that means these girls weren't even venturing further, right? Who did they share it with? Their friend. The first person they go to is a friend. That's why we spend a lot of time with young people, because you're the one who is going to be the first responder in many cases. You may not be a perpetrator, you may not be a survivor, but you might be the peer who the person goes to. Then the teacher, and last the parent. And we'll see why last the parent. And what action was taken? In most cases, no action. Why no action? Because obviously the peer may not have known what to do, or they spoke to the family or the teacher. What was the effect on life? In most cases, they changed the route because they didn't want to deal with it, right? So they changed the route. But in many countries, many other cities, we did a project in Kibera in Nairobi. If you change your route and are found in a different part, you run the risk of being kidnapped and therefore trafficked. So you're putting yourself at further risk if you change your route. Or what was the second effect? They only were allowed to leave home with family members, or they were prevented from getting out of home. So that's why you see they don't like talking to their parents about it, because under the guise of safety, their movements are restricted, their mobility is restricted, and thereby their opportunities. How have we used the data? Like I mentioned, individuals can make better choices regarding their safety. It's not about avoiding public spaces, but really understanding what kind of issues are there and then preparing, having a backup plan, how you're going to deal with it. So as human beings, we respond in 3 ways. We freeze, we fight back, or we flee in stressful circumstances. In most cases like this, we freeze and then we beat ourselves up emotionally saying it was not an appropriate response, but actually it was. But could you have a different response? That is possible if you are anticipating it, you're prepared. And if you walk with purpose, if you are confident, if you are, if you know what you're going to do and you have a plan in action. And I say this because I was a safety instructor in the aviation industry for many years. And I draw from my experience on building situational awareness. So if you see, what is this girl doing? She's drawing an art mural. And we've used art mural in key locations often. And over here, we call them talking walls. Through the wall, they're actually communicating their angst, that they are not going to put up with this kind of harassment. They're going to speak up. They're going to raise their voice. They're going to break their silence. And they painted staring eyes on this particular wall, and it made such a difference in their community. Then the community. What is the role of communities? We are all part of communities. This is not a woman's problem alone or an individual's problem. It's a societal problem. So how can we actually use this data to start a conversation and dialogue around this issue, as well as find solutions? And the solutions can involve police, but it's not the only solution. You can engage with your elected representatives, you can work with your campus authorities, you can work with the transport officials, and so on and so forth. In many places, they've even worked with religious leaders. And sometimes engaging men and boys in the discussion also has a big impact. So this is outside a toilet in Delhi, where the public toilet seems to be a hotspot, and it comes up pretty often on our map. There were no doors, windows, or lighting. And there was also a couch placed outside this toilet complex where the young men would sit and make fun of the girls and women using this place. So they painted a wall mural, they put pressure, got the authorities to fix the doors, windows, lights, but they also engaged the boys to join their campaign. And from being perpetrators, they became allies. This is a community sabha where they invited the police for a conversation on public safety. Police said there's no issue. They gave them a bunch of reports from our site, and the police had to change beat patrol timings. This is the same police in that locality where they invited the youth to come to the police station and said, don't wait for a problem to come to the police, but why don't you build trust ahead of time? Come have a cup of coffee. They explained how the FIR works, how the system works, and showed them around the police station. And it was an eye-opening exercise for both sides, I would say. So this is it from us, at least from me. I'm happy to take questions or hand it back to Vaibhavi.
Thank you so much, Elsa. If anybody has any questions that they would like to ask about the presentation, please shoot ahead. Elsa has an abundance of experience in how to deal with not just survivors and bystanders, but also how to be able to speak to stakeholders. That is something that you will really, really love to learn from her. So if you have any questions, you can just raise your hand. If not, you can just put it in the chat if you're comfortable with it. We could also take questions after another presentation. We could go to the app, Elsa, and see how we have to actually go and use this app as a tool in order to collect data. So, so your primary work is going to be on the Safe City app, which is something that I will show you how to use right now. That is the only tool that you will have to use in order to collect data. We have a set of questions lined up in the app which help you, the survivor or somebody who knows the survivor, to navigate through how to, what all information is supposed to be given. So I will start sharing my screen now. and let you know how to. And one more thing I really need to focus on before we go ahead. You will not be able to know how to use the app just by looking at the demonstration, which is something that I will also share on the community intervention page. But you have to learn it through actually doing it. The moment you actually register a report yourself, you will understand the functioning of it. So it's just as simple as that.
So let me answer that question.
We do have a
from
question, yeah.
Chinmay. Chinmay says, how do we verify how much of the reports on the app are true? So like I said, it's crowdsourced and unverified, but in our experience, most of these reports come from these interventions that we do. So I would say 95% of the reports come from, say, this kind of exercise, right? Where you go speak with your community, get them to report and start building the data. We cannot guarantee that it's true. However, we are not looking at individual cases. We are looking at the data set and we are looking at the pattern and trend that is emerging. There is no naming, shaming, or blaming. So we don't believe that anyone would put a false report. And for a trend to be false, the whole data set needs to be false. So we are looking at, okay, what is the number one issue in this area? If it is touching, groping, how do we want to look at it? And Vaibhavi will walk you through the different weeks, or rather the different phases of this challenge, where you first start understanding what is sexual harassment. Second is start talking to your community and collecting the data, or look at the map and see if we already have the data. Third is going physically to a space and looking at why is that space contributing to this kind of violence or harassment. And then fourth is engaging your community in what is it that they would like to do. And then fifth is really designing your intervention. So whatever be the intervention, whether it's a signature campaign, whether it is a wall mural, whether it is a video, whether it is going to the police and talking to them. We had Aishwarya from our Safe City Champions go to the Bangalore police and present the dashboards to 3 different police stations. And she got them to stamp it and understand it. So, it's about how are you going to use it? But from a law perspective, we want a legal solution. Because we have the laws in India, the enforcement of the law is very weak. So how can we build that, perspective of justice in this? And even if it's anonymous, you can still create an ecosystem that is safe and strengthen that.
Thank you, Chinmay, for that question. Shoot more questions if you have, everyone. We will try to answer as much as possible. And once we go to the demonstration of how to use the app, we will see how what are the trends and patterns that we've been talking about that will help you in understanding the situation at ground in your locality or your preferred locality for that matter. So I will start sharing my screen and we will go to the part where we have to use so this is an app which you can also download, and it is also a platform, a web platform where you can directly go on your website and use it. Yes, here we are. Can you see the screen? Okay. If you go to safecity.in, this is our home page here. This is where all the data is there. We will start with reporting. Now, before we start reporting, I will have to tell you this one important, very, very important detail is that since you are participating as a participant in this challenge, all of you, each one of you will be given a unique code. What will this unique code do? This unique code will help us identify the area, the target area that you are working on, A. B, the amount of reports you've gotten, and C, we will have the same amount of data that you have collected and we'll add on to that and give you more data. So that's why we need to know the unique code that you have, and you have to use this unique code in order to get your reports registered in your under your name, so that that becomes a list of things that you have done in your challenge, so that it helps us track you. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. So we will go ahead with how to share an incident anonymously. We come here. This is the main page that opens. We'll start with answering questions here now. So what is my country? My country is India. What is my city? I will put Pune. Now you have options of languages which I'd want to focus on. You have English, Hindi, Malay, and Marathi. So you can pick whatever is comfortable for you or the survivor for that matter in order to understand best in what happened with them. I will pick English and I will go on proceed. Next. Here is a privacy policy that we engage with everybody who's on the platform, not just the people who report, but also the people who study this data. It's almost like understanding how this information is sensitive and that we use it for the right purpose, and nobody's name, basically a confidentiality agreement, if you may understand. So I consent and agree to it. We understand it is difficult to recall one's traumatic experiences. If you feel uncomfortable at any point, know that you can exit. If you have not hit the submit button, your data will not be saved. Even though you are sharing your experience anonymously, we need your consent to include your experience in our database of crowdsourced data. I agree. Next. Who are you sharing for? So like I said, yesterday somebody called me and asked me that the area that they stay in, not a lot of people have a functioning internet or a functioning mobile phone. So how do you help them? You don't have to necessarily ask them to download the app and get them registered on this, but you can do it on behalf of them, as most of us will be doing it. So who are you sharing this for? In case you are reporting for someone else, please make sure you answer the question on their behalf. So most of us in the challenge will be doing it on behalf of somebody else. So we have to do it on someone else's behalf here. Okay, we go on next. How old are you? In case you're reporting for someone else, please make sure that the answer, you answer the questions on their behalf. All of these questions are going to be on behalf of the survivor right now. So I will put 24. Next, please tell us your gender. Are you male, a female, your gender non-binary, or you prefer not to say? I go with female. Next, can you tell us what happened? Now here we'll have to use words in order to describe what had happened. We will also have indicators later in order to identify what happened to us categorizes as what. So I will say since I'm writing on behalf of somebody else, I will say I was Now this is the important bit. Here, when you're trying to tell us what happened, this is where I put my code. So I put my code as S0042. See, this is my assigned code. So I put this code so that the people who are collecting this data will understand that this has come from Vaibhavi, who's been given a unique code. And that's how we go about it, because this is going to be an indicator. So you have to make sure, if you want to make notes well and it'll be brilliant, you have to write your code in the description of what happened. If everybody is fine with it, I will go ahead. Can you tell us when this happened? So an estimate day could work. I would say it was on Friday. This is an estimate. Next. Now we come to the time of the day. This is again an estimate. Now, this is what I was talking about earlier, when what I described as an incident will be categorized as what here. Was it a rape or sexual assault issue? No. Was it chain snatching or robbery? No. Was it domestic violence? No. Physical assault, stalking, ogling, facial expressions, staring, taking photos without permission, indecent exposure, masturbating in public, touching, groping, showing pornography without consent, commenting, sexual invites, online harassment, human trafficking, or others. Now I will identify it as something called as commenting and sexual invites. This is what happened. But can I do multiple things? Yes. There were incidences of things that were happening. This person was commenting, but he also followed me and he was staring at me. That could be a combination of things that happened. Basically, this question is for you to identify and pinpoint exactly what happened. So we'll go to, or you could also do others and explain what it was. So we go to the next slide. Have you reported the incident to the police? Now, this is a very important question that you have to take into consideration, is because a lot of times it becomes easier for us to present this data to the stakeholders and tell them that this happened, but did people come to you and register a complaint? And that is an important information for us. So you have options of, did you report the incident to the police? Yes, I did. I will in the future. I'm not sure if I want to. No, I tried. We can go with, yes, I did. Next. Do you feel any of the below led to you being attacked? Now, this is a question of empathy that you will have to understand that incidences of sexual offenses are intertwined with a lot of other dimensions and issues. For example, gender, caste, ethnicity, religion, it may be, relationship status, it may be. These are the valuable inputs that we need in order to understand a comprehensive idea of how the issue, the incident took place. So I could say that, yes, was I harassed because of my gender? Of course. Was I harassed because of my religion? Yes. Because the harasser wanted to intimidate me? Yes. You have these many options. So we go on next again. Would you like to add anything else about your experience? This is also another question that takes into consideration not just the factual happening of the issue, but also what it made you feel, or how you, if you would want to describe a little more about it. So I would go ahead and say, I went to watch a movie, and when I came out of the theater, I was waiting for a cab. That is when someone catcalled me and made sexual remarks on my physical appearance. All right, we move on to the next question. This is one of the main things that we'll have to definitely keep in touch, keep in mind. The first thing is map. You have to map it and say where exactly it happened. What will it do for us? It will help us create a data source that will tell us what are the hotspots of the city where these incidences happen. So I will write this happened, and I will just put a location of Inox. Here it goes. This is Inox. You can see it. If you want to, you can go ahead and put exactly where it happened. I'll put it on the street. Done. Here it is. Address has been pinned. Area has been pinned. If you want to write street number, locality, that is done. This is the last bit. This information that you shared with us anonymously helps shape policy and decision making. Please confirm that you are submitting information true to your knowledge. You can go back and edit your answer before submitting if needed. So you can still go back and edit your answer if you think you have doubts about whether you filled it correctly or not. But I know that I filled it correctly. I will click on confirm and I will go on next. This is my final question. Thank you so much for sharing this information with us. You are helping build safer cities. All the information you provided is anonymous and will continue to be. How did you hear about Safe Cities? The final question, just to understand where the information is coming from. I will say that I am a volunteer for Safe City, filling out as a participant, and go on next. Done. Thank you for submitting your report. By sharing your experience with us, you are helping prevent 3 others from experiencing something similar. If you have 5 minutes, would like to know more about the incident to understand other factors that play a role in sexual violence. By answering a few questions, you will help us build safer cities. So I could go back, and this could be just the end of the reporting for me. Or if I am invested, I would go ahead and say, yes, I would like to help, and see what are the other sets of questions. Now, this is a secondary form that comes around, which has more comprehensive questions in order to understand, or even in order to profile what is happening to who at the moment. And that is important. Yeah. What's the highest level of education you have completed? I have completed. Please keep in mind, I'm I'm filling this form on behalf of someone else. So I have to keep that in mind for them. I will say associate's degree next year. Next. Do you have any kind of disability, mental or physical? No. Next. What religion do you follow? Next. What is your caste or tribe? Next. What were you doing when the incident took place? On my way to or from school home. I was shopping, running errands, on my way from a meeting, meeting friends or family. I was with friends, family in public space. I was traveling in a different city. Where did the incident take place? On transportation, train, metro, bus station, on the street, public space, in market, other. On the street. Who were you with when the incident took place? I was alone. I was with friends, colleagues, family, others. How many perpetrators were there? 1. Many? Don't know. What was the gender of the perpetrator? Perpetrators. Select all that applicable. Male. How old was the perpetrators? Approximately 30 to 39. Who was the perpetrator? Passerby, stranger, driver, intimate partner, someone I know, person of authority, others. You understand that these questions lead to us gathering data in order to see what are the patterns of not just locality, the street, which we studied in the first part of the primary questionnaire, but this will give a more comprehensive idea of what are the patterns in people as well. A stranger, passerby. How did you respond to the perpetrators? I ignored. I did not know what to do. I was unable to respond. I responded to the perpetrator verbally. I responded to the perpetrator physically. I asked for assistance from people nearby. I called for assistance. I screamed. I ran away from the perpetrator. I asked for assistance from people nearby. People nearby who did not see the incident, people who saw the incident, people who saw the incident. What did you do after the incident? I called a friend. I told a family member. I reported the incident to the police. I reported the incident to my organization. I was unable to do anything. Reported on Safe City. Definitely reported on Safe City. And I told a friend. If you reached out to the police, please tell us your experience. How did you feel after the incident? Now, this is trying to create an empathy map of what the survivor must be going through. Was I scared? Of course. Was I angry? Yes. Ashamed, embarrassed? No. Strong, confident? No. Violated and disgusted? Yes. Regretful that I did not respond to the perpetrator. Regretful that I didn't report to the police. Confused. Lost faith and ability to trust people. I felt it was my fault because the way people I told reacted. Anxious, depressed, wish I didn't exist. The same as I had before the incident. This could be a recurring incident for some people. How did you change your behavior after the incident? I avoided places. I started learning self-defense or carrying items of self-defense. I changed how I travel. I stopped going to school or work. I changed my school or workspace. I did not change my behavior. I changed how I travel. I avoid traveling alone now. Yes. How did others around you react to what was happening? They did not notice, definitely. They noticed but did nothing. A man confronted the perpetrator. A woman confronted the perpetrator. A man or men called the police. A man or women called the police. No one else was around me. They noticed but did nothing. What do you think can help prevent similar incidences like this in the future? Better law enforcement? Definitely. Better education? Yes. You want more police on the street, of course. Better education, improving infrastructure, creating a gender equal society, censor sexually explicit or violent content on TV. Yes. More job opportunities for men or youth, more sex segregated public transport. I feel the best would be better education, because education is one of the key elements that could help us, like Elsa was saying, help us unlearn things, unlearn biases that have been incorporated in our system, conditioned in our system since long time back. Sex education, definitely. This is what my answer would be. I will go on to next. Would you like to add anything else about the incident? I felt like I didn't mean anything, like I was lesser than a human. Next. Done. We have filled both the forms. Now we have done the primary, which is the most important one that you have to fill. The secondary is something that you can ask and see whether the survivor has the mental bandwidth to go through these questions, which always helps us identify these patterns. If you if you see the questions, you will be able to understand where we're trying to lead the survivor and trying to get information from them and being as empathetic as possible. So yeah, especially for this challenge, you will have to go ahead and take entries. In the first week, the task of the first week will be using this app and getting minimum of 10 entries each. I will send a separate email explaining to you the tasks of the week. And like Elsa said, we'll have 4 different tasks for each week as we go on. First being collecting data, trying to understand where you're collecting this data from. Somebody yesterday asked me a question saying that they may not be comfortable as a participant and as person themselves that to go on street and speak to people and engage other people on the street and ask them to fill this data. What you could instead do is start from your home, start from your own society, start from your friend circle. That's the best way to get people to start speaking about this issue, which has been a taboo for so long. You may, although I encourage people to go and speak to people you don't know, but I feel like if you're comfortable, then it starts from home. You can speak to your friends, you can speak to your own family, your college mates, your classmates. This is how you start engaging in this dialogue, right? And also your friends and family would be able to trust you more with this information and empathize more with what you're doing. So that will be my idea to go about this. Yeah, if you notice, the one main thing that you have to do is make sure that you put your unique code that is given to you in the description. That is the most important thing that you have to do. Compulsorily have to fill the first form. Second form is still an option on, again, the survivor and how they want to go about it. If you have any questions, please shoot. I will also upload a video on the app, so it is easy for you to understand. While we go ahead with the questions, one thing I would like to tell you that when we collect this data is collected in a form and is represented visually in a way that is easy for us to understand. I will give you an example of that. So this is, can you see the screen? I hope you can. This is our data from Pune city till September. So this is from 2012 to September 2021. One thing I would say before going, which is something that you should note down, like you did about the data, about the code, is that we do not take data from anyone who's under the age of 18. Keep in mind, I reiterate, we do not take data from anyone who is under the age of 18. Why? Because legally speaking, they are considered as minors and they have different laws and legality that works in that aspect, which is POCSO, if you know. And so those are a different set of laws that deal with them. So we do not take any entries from 18 and under. That's one thing that I wanted to say. So if you can see here, this is the dashboard. You can just a moment. I would just ask everyone to just mute yourself. Yeah. So this is the dashboard. This is the data that will be given to you when you pick your target location or your preferred location. The number of cases according to the hour of the day. You can see hour 12, 2, 4, 6, 8. How many reports came? Not at what time the reports were entered, but what time the incident took place, right? And you can see that 6 to 8 p.m., 7 p.m. is the highest registered hour, the most busy hour for sexual offenses on a day. If we go down into the breakdown of the incidences by location. Now, these are the top locations that are there in Pune, and Shivaji Nagar is the highest, has the highest count. Hadapsar has lesser. Ferguson College has lesser. So this is how it goes about it. Now, these are breakdowns by incidents, and these are breakdown of incidences by location, and this is by category of offense. So you can see Shivaji Nagar is the most prominent place of sexual offenses occurring. But if you go to the category, you see that facial expressions, ogling and staring is the highest category of sexual offense that is registered. That's how you can do the breakdown. You can do a combination of these also. You just have to tell us what location is preferred by you so we can present the data to you. You can see ogling is number 1 in Pune. Commenting and sexual invites is second. Stalking is third. Touching and groping is fourth. Taking photos without permission is fifth. This is how it goes about, and you have the data entry here as well. If we go down, you'll get a summary of reports collected in September 2021. That is the most recent entry of Pune. It's actually October, but September we have right now. So the breakdown of incidences by categories is here. Taking photos without permission was the most occurred in September, while you could see on an aggregate, taking photos is a number 5th data. Then online harassment is a new age evil that is happening because of the pandemic. Workspaces and schools have come online in a cyberspace. So we can see that online harassment has also increased from the aggregate where it was on the 9th number. Breakdown of incidences by location can also happen month-wise and year-wise and a collective. Like you can see in the month of September, Wagholi has had most number of reports. And trends during the day of time is, again, that's the only thing that stayed same, which is looks like 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. If you go down, you could see these questions could also really help you in understanding what is the outlook of a survivor of already existing resolution mechanisms, right? What is a police station? Police station is where you go in order to solve your issue, in order to complain. Now, how many was this incident reported to the police? 101% said no. So you can see 100% said no. Nobody is going to the police. So that is another trend that you can understand and study. Trends according to age of the victim. Now, this is another very important trend to study, because that gives us an idea of who becomes victim easily, and then understanding theory of victim precipitation that you will study. So we have 15 to 20 as the target age, which has the most number of victims coming from, then 21 to 25. Then you have gender of the victim. Here again, 100% female. So these are the trends, say gender, age, police's reaction, incidences by category, incidences by location, and trends on time and day of the day when the incident took place. These are the trends that you will understand, you will have to study in order to come up with your own study of how to go about dealing with these issues in your area. This is all for now, at least. I don't want to overwhelm you with too much information. If you have any questions, you can please ask now. Can we collect data from 2 or more cities? Of course, you can collect, Gurpreet. You can collect data from 2 or more cities, but will it be easy for you to address issues and try to see if you can physically go and try to intervene in the community? Because that is what we're trying to see, right? We've been trying to get as much data as possible, but now here we're trying to see if students could select one community, one locality, one target place, and then study that locality in however manner that you want to. Of course, you can go ahead and do 2 or more cities, but if only that is flexible and doable for you as a participant. We have more questions. If I told my friend to fill the form, then will she require my code? Yes, she will have to use your code, and she will have to put that code in the description box in order for us to know that she filled it on her behalf, but through you. So the report came through you. So that's the idea, because you will be studying that report and the samples that you collect, right? A few things about collecting data is that have maximum amount of empathy and sensitivity when you're speaking to survivors about issues like these. These are heavy issues. These need a lot of processing, for that matter. You can't just obviously go in the street and ask somebody, hey, have you been sexually harassed? There is a conversation that needs to start. There is a way in which you can build trust. More importantly, you need to understand what your target audience could be like. For example, I can tell you one thing. Okay, 1 second. One more question is there. Is the minimum of 10 cases a hard limit? What if we choose a very specific locality and cannot get more than 5-6 people to fill the form? I totally understand, Srija. The idea is that you have enough data to study. It's not about putting data in the system. It's more about, will you be able to study 5 and 6 people as sample and come up with a theory of your own, a resolution, a prototype of your own, then well and good. Also understand that we'll be giving you more data, additional of whatever is in our system of the target locality that you have. So keep in mind that sometimes we may not have the data of a specific locality in a city like Meerut, for example. So then what do? Then we depend on you to get that data, so that it becomes easier for you to understand and make patterns of the trend, make patterns and trends of the data that is collected. And I believe the more the better, but if you can only get 5 and 6, I can totally understand. We will try to fill it up with yeah, the idea is to encourage more people to report. Each of you have 10 friends. Elsa said the right thing. You can go ahead and start with just having your close peer in answering to these questions. That's how you're going to start, because you're not going to get trust from a random stranger on the street. You may, but it's difficult. But how do you start then? You start with people who have confidence in you and people who actually trust you. Make a chain of people and it will definitely help. Definitely, yeah. See, this app is like a venting ground for a lot of people who don't have space to speak, have lost the opportunity, or don't want to speak because of multiple reasons. So why does this app exist? This app exists so that we can still have a space where women, children, men who have gone through this trauma can still express themselves. That is the idea with the app. So you present to them this way that many a times your stories must have gone unheard, but not on this app. You still have an opportunity to speak your mind, to express yourself, to vent out the anger, confusion, and realize that there are so many other people with you, around you, who experience the same things and go through the same things, and above and beyond that are here to help you out, like you guys, in participating in this challenge. Can you please elaborate a little more on how we will be moving ahead to make a prototype from this data? Yes. So the idea is that your weeks will be divided by tasks. First week will essentially be on you studying the app, trying to get a hold of it and collecting data, like I said. From next week, we'll start studying this data. We will start identifying patterns. You will start identifying these patterns, and you will start creating a trend of crime that is happening in the target location that you have, right? After the second week, the third week will be a lot of brainstorming on how to come up with ideas, creative ideas, in order to break these patterns. Now, keep in mind that all of these things that we're going through are all of these tasks that we are going through are assisted by a number of master classes that have been organized for you guys. So we also have a lecture recording of Advocate Aileen, who extensively works on sexual offenses, and she's been working in Bombay High Court for a while. So she's given a lecture on the same issue that we will share with you. You'll get to understand the ground realities of socio-cultural issue of sexual offenses. Then we have another masterclass on storytelling, where you will learn how to take this data and write or create a narrative around this data. Like I said, a lot of times numbers can be too much information. Like we just saw a looking at dashboard, of course, these are trends, but these numbers could be scaring a lot of people. So we create a story around it. For that, we have another masterclass where you learn how to how to incite empathy among stakeholders and people that you will be involving in this challenge, to understand this data through stories. Then we also have another masterclass on building solutions. That is the one, Soni Sati, which will deal the most on how to come up with a perspective of looking at things and trying to solve them, and how to create prototypes, how to create solutions, how to test these prototypes. Because here what we're trying to see is that we're not just doing this as a 3-week, 4-week challenge. We're trying to come up with ideas in the 3-4 weeks, test them on ground once, and see if this is viable, if this is something that is sustainable, if this is something that the community agrees with and has an impact. Then how do we take it ahead? And that's why Agami as well as Red Dot Foundation has come together in order to see if there are ideas on ground from you guys that we can build upon with you in the future. So it's more of a long-term journey, but the 3 or 4 weeks ahead in the beginning would be just brainstorming, studying data, collecting data, the initial bit of your research. So that's the idea. What in the case of minor, is anyone older can report on? No. So I will tell you, Surya, in the case of minors, Section 19 of the POCSO Act says that you cannot report the incident of sexual offense that took place, including a minor, to anybody else but the police. So you can report on Safe City, but your priority is that you have to mandatorily go and report it to the police. And with the police, a lot of legalities come, because if you want to take the responsibility of going ahead and taking care of children, then that is a prerogative that we may understand. But right now we do not deal with 18 and under, because like I said, legality is very, very, very different there. Laws are very stricter, and for all the right reasons. So we exclude under 18 students. For under 18 students, we have a lot of other programs which involve sex education, education on laws and rights, and certain workshops which help them identify gender stereotypes. So these are the things that we're doing for under 18 children. But on the app, even the app will not let you register, because the app has a limit of 18 above only registering. So that's how we go about it. Yeah. Anything else? One more thing I wanted to ask. One more thing I wanted to point out is that, yes, like Elsa said, you can be 18 and report a past incident, but you cannot be under 18 and actively reporting while you are under 18. So you can't be a minor at this moment when you report. You can be over 18, you can be 24 and still report about an incident that happened when you were 16. So that's how it goes. Another thing that I wanted you guys to really keep in mind is something that I will also put in the guidelines for you guys to see later, is that when you are collecting data, right, when you are going and speaking to your friends, make sure that you write down the numbers of people that you have spoken to, in the sense that number of people you've spoken to. Say I spoke to 8 people. Out of those 8 people, 3 people agreed to share their story of sexual harassment, and the rest 5 never experienced a case of sexual harassment. What it does is that it will give you an aggregate understanding of how, out of how many people that you spoke to responded, and out of those, how many responded, how many reported. So this kind of information is extremely necessary. I will put all of this down in the guidelines for you to go ahead with, but I'm just making that sure right now as well. We'd want to be able to collect all kinds of data of people who have not been harassed is also important in order to move towards solution and solution building. Elsa has shared our info email ID for you to report if you have a case of child sexual abuse. So you can speak to us directly there. Any other question? Anything else you guys want to share? What you feel about this challenge? Where are you right now? Also, the fact that I'll just say I will also be doing this challenge with you. So I also know that the issues on ground are going to be difficult, especially right now that with the new COVID variant, things may get difficult. So please make sure that you follow all the COVID guidelines around your city, your state. Keep yourself safe.
I have a question. Like
Yeah.
if someone have seen someone getting harassed, like if they are on the street and they are not get harassed themselves, but they have seen getting someone harassed, can we report it too?
Yes, Astha, you can report it. Of course, you can report it. You have the option of reporting on behalf of someone, right? But maybe in understanding their details would be become an issue. You'll have to give an estimate. Even if you're writing their age, say 25, you have to put in bracket and say an estimate of 25. And the date and time, of course, will be as the same as when you saw it. So you can register it on behalf of someone else. The idea is to collect reports of these incidences happening. So of course you can do it on behalf of someone else. Yes, Sheila said the right thing. No names at all. Okay, if you guys do have more questions, please shoot them. You have my email ID. You have my email ID on the web app website also, and you have it personally as well. Just shoot any questions you have. We are here. Yes. Our medium of communication is Discord and WhatsApp. Make sure that as soon as we finish with this meeting, you do go on Discord and join Discord, because most of our information is going to come to you through Discord and WhatsApp, and becomes an easier platform to communicate also, because especially Discord for people who don't want to share their numbers. I hope to see more of you guys on Discord and WhatsApp ASAP, because we will be sharing reference material over there, any updates that are there, upcoming events, links for upcoming events, links for everything that was spoken today, links for Elsa's presentation and the things that she referred to as well. So that's going to be your one spot for all information. So please make sure that you're on Discord, and we'll also have good engagement there with open houses, discussion, video calls, Discord party if some may. So please join us on Discord. Discord is a great medium of communication. All right. Thank you so much for coming for the session. We need to mark our code only once, right? No, you have to mark your code with every entry that comes. You have to mark your code with every entry that comes, because you understand that the data is collected anonymously, right? When I am typing this data from my phone, it is entirely anonymous, and number of times that I report, it's all going to be anonymous. How do I make sure that this stays anonymous, but also indicates that it was collected by a participant? So you have to compulsorily put your code in every entry that you come up with. That is important. If you have any other follow-up questions, just shoot an email, call, text, shoot it on Discord as well. That's the easiest platform, easiest way to communicate. We will see you again next week. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Elsa. Thank you, Kirtana. Thank you, Sheila, Sonali, Tanya. Thank you everyone for coming, asking questions, being patient, and participating in this challenge. This is going to be an experience that we share together. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vaibhavi. Bye, everyone. All the best.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.